We appreciate you coming out here today. The purpose of our press conference today is to talk about celebrating a tremendous point in history, a point that was too long coming, but one that is important to remember so that we can remember the significance of what occurred 50 years ago and recall the cost of that so that we can go forward and hopefully protect our future by carrying forward the importance of the event. And that event is the Voting Rights Act of 1965. 50 years ago that bill was passed. Understand that the 15th Amendment had already granted the right to vote of all men, regardless of race, creed, or religion. Unfortunately, that did not open the polling place doors to everyone. Also, unfortunately, it didn't include women, and women were then included in the 19th Amendment historically. It also did not include Native Americans, and so there are things about our history of voting that were unfair, and the voting place, which ought to be open to all citizens, was not always so equally opened. And in 1965, though, we took a major step in opening those doors with the passage of the Voting Rights Act. We're going to have a rally tomorrow here at Parkview Field, home of the Tin Caps, where we are going to celebrate that act, talk about why it was necessary, the history going up to it. We're going to have speakers, some of which who are here with me today, but one, Dr. Aden of the African American Historical Museum is going to talk about how that act came to be. We're going to have Clifford Bertram, a member of the Martin Luther King Club, who's going to talk about the 50s and 60s, the background for the act and what led up to the passage of this act. The mayor of Fort Wayne is going to talk about the act and some of the current political climate of the Supreme Court that recently struck down a significant portion of the act, and that there's legislation pending to restore some of that. So we're going to talk about the past, we're going to talk about the present, we're also going to talk about the future. The theme of this is honor the past, protect the future, vote. One reason we want to celebrate the Voting Rights Act is because it does not do a whole lot of good to have the right to vote if we do not vote. And unfortunately, a long battle was fought to get these rights to vote, and in the last election, in our local primary here, less than 10% of the eligible voters actually bothered to show up and vote. And that is an insult to those who fought and died to accomplish this right. And so we want to celebrate this act, but we want to remind people and challenge them that it is not enough to have the right. What we need to do is exercise that right, because it is true that the one time that we are all equal is in that voting booth, where we have the absolute right to vote for who we wish to vote for, to control the type of government we want. But we can only do that if we exercise that right. And the apathy that has been out there of not voting is an insult to those who fought for this right. And what we want to do is remind people that there was a cost to this, that the reason that cost was paid was because people knew how valuable that right to vote is. And we're going to celebrate that. We're going to talk about that. We are going to see the speech that President Johnson delivered when the act was enacted. On the Jumbotron, we're going to be running slides of pictures of the time, of the progress that was going on during that time, and we're going to hear, as I say, a variety of speakers talk about the significance, including one who was at Selma, which was the key point that gave the impetus that would fuel the ability for the act to be passed rapidly, and that is the March in Selma, where people, peaceful marchers marching for voting rights, were attacked by state troopers violently. The good news about that was it was on national television. And so people saw the unfairness, they saw the oppression, and it gave that impetus that allowed the president to go to Congress. President Johnson went and asked for them to pass the act. The March in Selma was in March, and by August, we had the act in place. It was passed overwhelmingly by both the Senate and the House, and then the President signed it on August 6th, 1965. And so we're going to celebrate that, and we invite the entire community to come out to beautiful Parkview Field, home of the Tin Caps. We're going to be inside, a place to sit. We're going to have the great sound system. We're going to have some gospel music, singing freedom songs traditional of the time. And then following that celebration in the Tin Cap Stadium, we are then going to march down the street to the federal courthouse, where on the steps we're going to have concluding remarks. So we invite the entire community to come out, bring out your children, particularly your teenage children, who need to know the importance of voting, that this was something that was significant enough to people that they would put their lives on the line to fight for it. And now you have that freedom, but the doors being open are of no value if you don't walk through them. And so we ask you, remember, honor the past, protect the future, and vote. We appreciate you being out here. Does anybody have any questions? Would you like to ask a question of myself or anyone else? All right. Anyone else?
Why do you think that Indiana had the lowest turnout in the nation last year?
There are a lot of factors that go into play in that. One, the politics of division that is going on right now causes a lot of people to feel like it's something they don't want to engage in. The districting patterns that we have, where we allow political parties to control the makeup of districts, create imbalances where they don't feel their candidates matter, or that it really matters that they go out, because if they are one party, the district is solidly one way, so if they go out, they're going to win anyway, so why show up? And if they're the other party, oftentimes it's hard for the other party to even get candidates to run in those races because they're so imbalanced. Therefore, voters start to feel like, what does it matter? It's already decided. And those are things that feed apathy. However, what I would tell people is those things get changed by going in and voting. Continuing to vote, let it be known that you will vote, will get that attention. But we need to remind people of that it does matter if they vote. And then I think we've failed to educate people on just what their vote, how their vote can be heard. And so we need to make sure we remind young people. I was talking to some young people outside of one of the Ys yesterday when I was handing out some of the literature promoting this event, and they were, I think, initially apathetic about discussing voting. But as I talked to them about the history a little bit, they got a little bit more excitement. Now, maybe that was just for a moment, but if we can give them more and more of those moments where we talk about how they can have an impact, I think then we can hopefully draw people back in. And we need to talk to our politicians about toning down the hate talk, toning down the rhetoric, talk about real policies and issues, talk about people and the impact on them, and be respectful of our opponents, because the reality is you look behind the scenes and very few of those politicians who act like they hate each other really do when you look behind the scenes, but on camera they do, and we need to tell them quit it. We need to tell them quit it, because you're hurting the overall picture. And so I call upon everybody to be more civil, to disagree vehemently. Anybody who knows me knows I will argue a point vehemently, but I do hopefully do it with respect, and I urge others to do so too, because when we don't, we tend to discourage people from voting rather than encouraging them from participating.